She saw more than the 9 tails. He saw past the genjutsu. What if Naruto and Kurenai fell in love, and chose forever? Chapter 1. Kurenai Yuhi Junin of Konoha no Sato sat in her apartment for what seemed like forever. She's been thinking about the one thing she's always wanted. A feeling she craved over everything else. Love. She's tried going on dates with guys, but they always turn out the same. The guy is some disgusting pervert who wants to get into her pants. Which isn't a surprise, she's a beautiful woman. Medium-length black hair, the most exotic crimson-colored eyes, and a body any girl would kill for. But finding that special someone is hard to do. The closest person, that's at least boyfriend material, would be Asuma Sarutobi. But he never gave her the time of day, or even close of being romantic at all. She tried Kakashi Hatake, and that ended in a disaster. She's thought of trying Kiba Inuzuka and Shino Aburame from her team. Shino is too weird for her taste. Always has that fascination with bugs. He would make a female Aburame very happy. Kiba is too much of a horn dog. She's caught him staring at her a couple of times. It made her slightly uncomfortable to be stared at with teenage lust. It's her day off today and she promised to meet her friend Anko out for dango, where else? And catch up. So she forced herself up and out the door towards the shop. As she was walking she saw the men around her send her lustful glances, and some even had the courage to try and seduce her or woo her with some idiotic pickup line. It always ended up horrible for them. She isn't dubbed the Ice Queen of Konoha for nothing, you know. She finally made her way to the dango shop and entered and found her friend already stuffing her face with dango. She gave a small smile and made her way over to her table. "Hello Anko," she said, and Anko finally looked up and gave a megawatt smile. "Hey there Kurenai-chan." Anko said loudly and Kurenai smiled at her. They talked about the trivial things. What they have been doing, plans they have, missions they have gone on, a perfect way to make a victim confess in interrogation. Oh, and don't forget how rusted can I help in making an enemy prisoner confess. Trivial stuff really. Anko looked up and saw someone she hasn't seen in a long time. She started but couldn't put a finger on it. Kurenai saw her friend's face take a look of glee to confusion. She raised any eyebrow and followed her gaze to a very attractive young man. The man looked to be about 6 feet tall, spiky blonde hair, a blue jacket over a black t-shirt, and black anbu pants. The man looked very familiar to her. She looked back over to Anko, and saw the smirk forming on her friend's face. "Oh no. Hey Blondie, why don't you sit over here with us?" she yelled at the blonde with a sly smirk on her face. Kurenai just sighed at her friend's antics, not surprised in the least. The blonde in question looked over with a raised eyebrow, and his eyes widened in realization. He made his way over and hovered over the table, with a very feral smirk. "Hey cutie, you're not going to sit?" Anko asked sweetly while intentionally leaning over, making her incredible bust stand out more. The blonde kept up his smirk. "I'm pleasantly surprised you don't remember me, do you Anko-san?" he said in kick hurt while Anko now raised an eyebrow in confusion, then smirked again. "Well, I have a lot of one-night stands," she said, and the blonde gave out a laugh. "Oh man, you really don't remember me." "Oh, I remember you, it was during the Chunin exams. You threw a kunai at me then picked my blood," he said, and the woman widened their eyes and the blonde gave a foxy grin. "Does the name Uzumaki Naruto ring any bells?" the now dubbed Naruto said. Kurenai and Anko both looked at each other, then at Naruto, and Anko broke the silence. "Holy shit, you're that blonde midget during the exams," Anko yelled, and Naruto's smirk was replaced with a glare. "I wasn't that short." Anko matched his glare. "You were short Blondie," she said, and they continued glaring at each other. Kurenai watched the two on amusement. They isn't a lot of people who ever competes with Anko on anything really. She looked at Naruto and was still shocked at how different he was. Then she remembered he's been gone for a few years now with Jiraiya of the Sannin. Feeling left out, she coughed in her hand and got the attention of the two people. The two people in question turned and looked over at her. She saw Naruto give her a sheepish smile and scratch the back of his head. "Sorry Kurenai-san, I got carried away," he said, and Kurenai offered a small smile. "No need to worry Naruto-san. How about you join us? I would like to know how your training went with Jiraiya-sama," she said, and Naruto's eyes lit up with the offer to talk about training. Of course Kurenai-san, he said, and he sat down at the closet seat, which just happened to be the seat next to Kurenai. As he sat down, his leg brushed against hers and a small spark was shared between the two. Kurenai tried to ignore it, and Naruto seems blissfully unaware. Enko, now feeling left out, started the conversation. Later, it was past sundown and a drunk Enko stubbed out of the dango stand with a sober Naruto and Kurenai behind her. Kurenai turned to Naruto. "It was nice seeing you again, Naruto-san, and sorry about Enko, she's very. Mama, don't worry about if she was just having fun. And please, just Naruto is fine. Naruto-san makes me feel old," he said with a smile, and Kurenai found herself smiling with him. "Kurenai-chan, I want to go home," Enko yelled from across the road, and Kurenai sighed while Naruto swallowed a laugh. "I'll see you later, Naruto," she said, and Nauru smiled and nodded. Kurenai turned around, and before she got far, Naruto called out to her, "Wait, Kurenai, want me to walk you home?" he asked with an embarrassed smile, and she felt her heart flutter at the motion. She gave a small smile. "That's fine, Naruto, I don't live very far anyway," she said, and Naruto nodded and scratched the back of his head. He does that a lot, Kurenai thought. "Well, have a safe trip, Kurenai, you too, Enko," he said, and Enko didn't hear him and he turned to leave. Kurenai watched him leave for a little while and tried to fight back a smile. "That was very fun. I've never laughed so hard with another guy before. He seems nice. I never caught him staring at my chest once, and he actually listened when I talked." She mulled over her thoughts as she and Enko entered her apartment. Enko made her way to the couch and jumped on it and lasses out instantly. Kurenai gave a small chuckle and made her way into her room. All the while her thoughts drifted off to a certain blonde. She put on her nightgown and climbed into bed. She closed her eyes and small smile formed as she shifted into sleep. Not a minute later her eyes opened wide and she shot out of bed with one thought in her mind. Hinata. Chapter 2. Okay, yes, it's been a while. Guess I'm lazy and I've been busy on top of all this. So I'm here to continue this story. Hope you guys like it. Kurenai woke up the next morning, flew in the show and threw her clothes on. She didn't even glance at Enko as she blurred out the door. She had her team meeting, but she was dreading meeting Hinata. She felt guilty how she thought of Naruto as boyfriend material when her own student is in love with him. She looked around as she was walking and noticed the lust-filled glances of men returning. She sped up her walking, trying to hurry away. "Oi, Kurenai." She spun her head around at the familiar voice. She raised an eyebrow and stopped walking and waited for the person to greet her. "Oi, Kurenai, what you in a rush for?" the voice said. Kurenai loomed dumbfounded. "Asuma, I need to meet my team," she said, and the now dubbed Asuma loomed at her confused. "Kurenai, the Hokage gave us all a week off, all Junin senseis and their students." Kurenai widened her eyes and she felt stupider than she has in a long time. Asuma saw her down face and decided to ask what he came here for. "So Kurenai want to go to the coffee shop? You know, just the two of us?" he asked while scratching the back of his head, embarrassed. Kurenai saw the action and her mind wandered off to a certain blonde-haired male. "Sorry Asuma, but I think I'll pass this time," she said, and she felt slightly bad for saying no, but she was just glad she didn't have to speak to Hinata today. Asuma was about to speak until another voice, "Oi, Kurenai-chan." She and Asuma both turned to see Naruto jogging towards them. Kurenai put on a small smile, while Asuma put on a look of annoyance. She noticed the looks of lust the women were giving him and gave a small scowl, but when she saw the big smile on his face she smiled once again. "Hello, Naruto-kun." She blushed slightly at the honorific she gave him, but Naruto seemed to smile even wider at it. Asuma's face turned from annoyed to mad as he eyes Naruto. He was surprised when the blonde did turn out to be way different, but he doesn't like people ruining his Kurenai time. "Hey Kurenai-chan, Asuma-san," he greeted, and Kurenai blushed slightly and Asuma's scowl went deeper. "Hello Naruto-san, is there something you need from us?" Asuma asked, his scowl still present on his face. Naruto ignored as seemingly unaware it was even there and answered happily, "Well, I'm here to see Kurenai-chan, of course," the blonde said, and before Asuma could protest he grabbed Kurenai's hand and shunshined away. Asuma stood on the streets of Konoha with a scowl in his face as he turned and walked away, muttering about stupid blondes. Naruto and Kurenai appeared on training ground 17 in a swirl of leaves, and Kurenai looked at the blonde and punched him softly in the arm. Baka, at least tell me first before do something like that, she said, even if she was glad to get out of the awkward situation with Asuma. Our blonde hero turned to her and starched the back of his head. Sorry Kurenai-chan, I just couldn't wait to show you this. Kurenai raised an eyebrow as he reached into his coat and pulled out a red and gold scroll. Naruto turned to her with a radiant smile and sat on the ground, motioning her to sit next to him. She obliged, and when she sat down their arms met and that familiar spark came back even stronger than before. And once again Naruto seemed blissfully unaware. Naruto opened the scroll and placed it on front of Kurenai. The red-eyed woman read through the scroll, her eyes getting wider and wider by every word. After she finished she looked over to Naruto, a look of shock still on her face. How did you find this, Naruto? She asked shakily, and Naruto gave her a foxy grin which she found oddly seductive. Well, me and Ero Sennin found a Kiri missing nin and we took him down and he had this scroll on him. Kurenai's shock turned into glee as she flung her arms around Naruto's neck in a hug. Naruto, who was caught off guard and fell over, taking Kurenai with him. Naruto and Kurenai looked at each other and a blush found its way on both their faces. They untangled the blush still present. I'm sorry Naruto-kun, she said, and the blonde hero waved her off a small blush still present on his face. Don't worry about Kurenai-chan, but I have to get going. I promised Ba-chan I would meet after I woke up, he said, and Kurenai raised an eyebrow again in confusion. Did you just wake up? She asked. Naruto chuckled and turned to her with her foxy grin and winked. Nope, he said, and sunshined away. Kurenai gave out a chuckle as her blush returned full force. She looked down at the scroll Naruto gave her and smiled once again. I don't know of this work, Naruto-kun. But if this will improve my genjutsu then I will try, she said with a smile and went to go start her training. Naruto sunshined into the Hokage's office and had to duck a stapler that was thrown at him. Really, Ba-chan, a stapler? He asked, and he was punched in his head and flown to the wall. Shut up Baka, you were supposed to be here an hour ago. The Hokage yelled, and Naruto climbed out of wall and smiled an embarrassed smile. Sorry Ba-chan, I was giving something to Kurenai-chan, he said, and Tsunade raised an eyebrow but pushed it to the back of her mind. Anyway, Jiraiya told me you finally know about your heritage, she said, and Naruto nodded and waited for her to continue. She walked to the wall, pulled a picture down that revealed a safe. She put in the code and pulled out through scrolls. She handed them to Naruto. These are all your father's notes on his fuinjutsu, and the Hiraishin, she said, and Naruto froze and took them shakily. He eyes each of them. One was red and had a orange strip, the second was a pure blood red. The third caught a solid gold color and a yellow strip circling the scroll. Naruto let 1 year escape his eye and a smile to overtake his face. He looked up at Tsunade and she returned the smile. He pocketed the scrolls and before he could leave Tsunade called him. Naruto, earlier you said you were with Kurenai, she asked curiously, and Naruto nodded. Hi, I found a scroll that she would like during my training period with Ero Sennin, he said, and the busty Hokage raised an eyebrow. What kind of scroll? It was a scroll on how to make genjutsu became a reality. It's not completed sadly, we found it on a Rouge Mist Nin a few months back, he said, and Tsunade widened her eyes. The possibilities were basically endless for genjutsu users. Naruto bid her a farewell, and when he left her office I sunshined away and went to my favorite place in Konoha, the Hokage monument. I sat on my father's head and opened the scroll on the Hiraishin. I scanned the scroll and I couldn't believe what my eyes saw. There were notes and sealing arrays decorating the pages. I read the contents and I could only smile. The fourth Hokage really was a genius the world has never seen before, and Naruto is glad to call him father. After he finished reading he looked up and realized the sun was setting. He looked over the village and still couldn't believe how beautiful it looked during this time of year. The sun shining down as it was setting, giving an orange aura to the village walls and trees. A soft breeze arrived, blowing the trees and making leaves fly out into the orange beauty. He laid down his father's head and slowly closed his eyes, letting the orange-stricken sky take him to a peaceful slumber. Chapter 3. The same blonde-haired male. The idea of sharing Naruto popped in her head once or twice but was quickly shut down. Kurenai was the jealous type and possibly couldn't stand something like sharing another male. And the more rational side of her knew Naruto wouldn't agree to that, knowing the type of person he is. She gave a grunt as she turned over on the grass and went over her options. She knew she was running away from telling Hinata and she didn't want to witness the backlash from Asuma either. Asuma, he was a problem. His attempts towards Kurenai have become more frequent recently. She held no romantic feelings toward him and all the previous feelings she may have had vanished long ago. Only one male was currently occupying her mind and she sighed blissfully. Thinking about a certain blonde. A feminine voice rang through the field and Kurenai snapped her eyes open and looked toward the direction of the voice. She gave a small pout and looked away with a huff. I don't know what you're talking about, Anko. The crimson-eyed beauty said, and Anko gave a mischievous smile. Sorry Nai-chan, but I know you too well. Anko yelled happily, her eyes showing glints of mischief and fake innocence. Wipe that smirk off your face, Anko-chan. Not happening. Kurenai gave off a sigh. Okay, and what if I was thinking of a certain blonde? She asked and soon regretted it, and she saw the look come over Anko's face. No, Anko, don't say any. Well, I would go to his place and suck high. With Naruto. It's the truth, Ba-chan. Our blonde hero yelled while Tsunade looked over at him in disbelief. How is that possible, Naruto? It's only been a week. It was just easy to figure out, okay. Tsunade let out a very unattractive grunt, and Naruto made a point to mention it and sat down into her chair. It's only been a week. How was it so simply to get on a week? It's an S-class jutsu. She said, more calm than she was a few seconds ago as she opened a new bottle of sake. I don't know, maybe I just understood it. Naruto said, scratching the back of his head in while his Ba-chan took a sip of her sake. That very Naruto-like, she said fondly while Naruto looked at her with a frown. What's that supposed to mean? Oh, nothing. Ba-chan. Anyway, she said, ignoring Naruto and taking another sip of her drink. The council has been on my tail since you've been back and frankly I'm annoyed. She said, making the male chuckle, and she continued. News about your heritage have leaked into the Shinobi Council, but luckily enough the Civilian Council still has no idea. She said, making Naruto sigh in relief, but more questing popped up. And Ba-chan, why exactly do you need me here? He questioned, and the busy Hokage have a slight chuckle in return. Well, since they figured out your heritage, and now me knowing of you mastering an S-rank jutsu on a week, not to mention that it was your father's. She said, but mumbled the last part, making Naruto to grin. You have been offered a seat in the Shinobi Council. She finished, making Naruto freeze and take a thinking pose. After a few minutes of silence, Tsunade began to grow impatient and was about to speak until Naruto finally decided to speak. Do I have to? Smack. Naruto blinked once, then again. And then once more. He eyes Tsunade as she slammed her head on her desk. Hard, I may mention. He walked over and poked her a few times and she gave no response. Just to be safe, he checked her pulse, and when he realized she was alive, he silently left her office. He left the Hokage tower, giving his farewells to Shizune, who gave a nod in return. Outside the tower, he walked down the streets heading to the nearest training ground. As he walked down the crowded streets, he noticed the women giving him wired glances. The normal glares were still there, but most of these new stars were from the women population. He ignored it and put up his normal smile. He continued until he heard a similar voice rang through the air. Shut up, Anko. With Kurenai. Shut up, Anko. Kurenai yelled as she eyes her purple-haired friend with a face of a tomato. Anko gave her regular smirk and a loud laugh. What's so wrong about that, Nai-chan? It's what I would to the sexy blonde. She said, and unknown to both of them, Naruto walked around the corner hearing everything they were saying. I don't want to hear what you would do to Naruto-kun, Anko. The raven said, and Anko's smile grew tenfold. Naruto-kun. She said with a leer, and Kurenai blushed even more. Damn, Nai-chan, sounds like you have feelings about this man. She said with a laugh, and both Kurenai and Naruto blushed a deep shade of red. Kurenai sat in silence and went over his thoughts. She did think of Naruto at boyfriend material, but never thought anything would happen about it. And Naruto probably wouldn't want to date a woman who was almost 10 years older than him. And the issue involving Hinata wouldn't get any easier. Anko looked over at her friend, watching her face go from confusion, realization, and to guilt. Anko raised an eyebrow and went over and poked her friend. Kurenai jumped at the sudden contact and snapped her head to her purple-headed friend. But before she could speak, Naruto made himself known. Hello, ladies. He said happily, and both females looked over to him, and Kurenai's face went red from the previous conversation with Anko. Hello Blondie. Enko yelled, a tint of red also adoring her features. Naruto gave them each a nod and looked over at the Ravenet. So Kurenai-chan, how's the training going? He asked with a knowing glint as Kurenai also held the same look in her eyes. It's going good Naruto-kun, I'm getting the hang of it pretty fast, but there's still some parts where I don't understand, she said as a tired look now adorned her features. Naruto raised an eyebrow in confusion as walked over to her. Do you have the scroll on you? She nodded and Naruto's smile grew wider. Well, why don't we look it over and see what we can do? Kurenai's face lit up and she gave an enthusiastic nod and they got to work on the scroll. Enko, who watched from the sideline, gave a small smile and made her way back home. Kurenai seemed happy with the blonde and she has no doubt they would get together, it'll only take a matter of time. Enko gave a sigh as she was walking. What a shame, I would have loved a crack at him, she said with a sadistic, seductive smile. Sugoi, that means you're a hero Naruto-kun. I mean, hero is a strong word. Nonsense, you saved the whole country and gave hope to many. If that isn't a hero, I don't know what is, Kurenai said with a giggle and Naruto gave out a chuckle. They have been looking over the genjutsu scroll for hours and they barely even tipped the iceberg. So they spent the next few hours telling stories and Naruto just finished telling her about his adventure in Wave. I guess I am a hero, huh? Naruto said quietly while Kurenai looked at him with a smile. They made eye contact and time seemed to slow down. Kurenai subconsciously scooted over towards the blonde and later did the same. They never broke eye contact as they scanned the other's face. Naruto locked onto the raven's crimson eyes and was mesmerized. I've never seen such beautiful eyes before, he thought, and slowly their heads inched closer. Kurenai shuddered as she felt the blonde's hot breath make contact with her skin. They lips only centimeters apart. Naruto. Naruto and Kurenai both snapped their heads up and jolted away from each other with matching blushes. They looked over to the sound of the voice and Naruto widened his eyes as did Kurenai. Kiba. What are you doing here? Naruto asked in surprise as he noticed the furious look on Kiba's eyes. What am I doing here? No one knew you were even back and here I find you about to kiss my sensei. He yelled in fury but could hear the underlying tone of jealousy in his voice. They both blushed again at being reminded at what almost happened and Naruto stood up and dusted himself off. He walked by ignoring Kiba and held a hand out for Kurenai and an embarrassed smile. She returned the smile and put her hand into his as he helped her off the ground. They locked eyes once more and got lost in each other's eyes. Hello, I'm still here. Naruto and Kurenai looked sheepish and Naruto looked at Kiba. Sorry Kiba, I should have told all of you guys I was back, he said and gave a small smile, but Kiba didn't let up on his glare. That doesn't explain why you're sexually assaulting my sensei, Kiba yelled and the forgetting Akamaru barked in agreement and Kurenai glared at her student. Naruto noticed her glare and took a step back in fear and pity for Kiba. Kiba Inuzuka, what I do on my own time has nothing to do with you whatsoever. And Naruto-kun wasn't trying to sexually assault me. If you knew the type of man Naruto is, you would know he wouldn't do anything like that, she said with a protective glare and both men looked shocked, but none other than Naruto. He looked at Kurenai with a warm glance. He knew he already started getting feelings for her and seeing her protect him like this made his feelings skyrocket even more. Kiba looked at his sensei in shock while Akamaru bowed his head behind his master's leg and whimpered a little. Kiba left the training ground with a look of embarrassment and jealousy on his face. Stupid Naruto taking what should he mine? I'm the alpha here and I'll show him who's boss and finally Kurenai will become mine, he thought with a lustful smile. Sorry about that Naruto-kun, she said and turned around while Naruto gave her small smile. It's fine Kurenai-chan. After a few more minutes Kurenai decided to head home and sleep over the day's stress away and Naruto decided to walk her home. She accepted the offer and they walked down the dark streets of Konoha. Once they reached her apartment Kurenai gave him a kiss on the cheek and Naruto walked home with a blush on his face. Kurenai watched the blonde walk down the street for a little bit before she broke out into a smile and unlocked the door to her apartment. She walked into the dark room and flipped on the light switch. As the lights came on she walked over to her bedroom and changed into a red nightgown. She climbed into bed and looked at her ceiling. Naruto really was a good guy and she wanted to give him a chance, but so many problems have been popping up. The situation with Asuma and especially Hinata have been tough already, and by judging the reaction that Kiba had, things have only gotten worse. She slowly closed her eyes, forgetting her problems and letting her thoughts of a certain blonde drift her off to sleep. Chapter 4. Sensei. Kurenai looked to her student daughter with a nervous smile. "Hey Hinata, can I talk to you?" Hinata gave a shy nod and left the training ground, leaving a confused Shino and pissed of Kiba behind. They entered her apartment and they both took a seat at the kitchen table. "What's wrong, Kurenai-sensei?" "Not going to put stutters for now." Kurenai didn't know how to say it, it was eating her up inside. Another week has passed and her feelings for Naruto only grew and grew. As her feelings grew, her guilt kept rising. It was hard not to fall for him, but that's a different story. "Hinata, why do you love Naruto?" As soon as she mentioned Naruto, Hinata's her face lit up into a blush and she looked down towards her lap. "He gives me hope that I can get past my shyness. He gives me hope that there's a reason for what my family does to me. He is kind and caring, he would do anything for someone if he knew it would help." She finished with a deeper blush and Kurenai frowned. "Fuck. Listen Hinata, I have something to tell you." Hinata looked up with a raised eyebrow but kept quiet for her sensei to speak. I don't think you love Naruto." Hinata's eyes widened and she looked at her sensei in shock. "Why would you say that, Kurenai-sensei? It sounds like you admire him more than want to be his girlfriend. And what if he had feelings for someone else?" Hinata looked down at her lap, letting her hair shadow her eyes. "It's there something you have to tell me, Kurenai-sensei." The crimson-haired woman bit her lip in nervousness. She was really going to say it. She didn't want to hurt Hinata, but she needed to tell her the truth as a friend, a sensei, and as family. Whoever said the truth hurts. They weren't kidding. "I'm in love wi. Kurenai-chan." Both girls jumped at the loud scream and snapped their heads to the sound and found a pool of blonde hair crashing onto her kitchen floor. Their eyes widened in shock and Hinata exploded into a blush. Said blonde picked himself up and looked at the red-eyed beauty with a mixture of happiness and glee. "I did it, Kurenai-chan." Kurenai tilted her head to the side and her eyebrows scrunched up, letting the occupants know that she was thinking, "Do what, Naruto-kun?" Naruto handed her the genjutsu scroll with a big smile. "I figured it out." Her eyes went wide and she jumped out from her seat and looked at the blonde in surprise. "What? Naruto-kun, this better not be a lie," she said as she sent a mini glare his way. He threw his arms up in defense, and no, instead it isn't. She giggled at his actions and her eyes lit up. "This is awesome. I can't now improve, thank you, thank you, thank you," she said as she threw her arms around him in a hug and he gladly returned it. Hinata saw the way Naruto and her sensei looked at each other. It wouldn't take a genius to figure out they already have a connection, and by the smiles and simple closeness you could tell it was a deep connection. A part of her was mad, but the other was happy for her sensei. The other part was regret in not telling Naruto sooner. She stood up from her chair and went to the door. "I'll see you later, Kurenai-sensei," she said quietly, and the red-eyed beauty looked at her with sad eyes. "Hinata Lu." "It's okay sensei, I understand now." She turned around and gave a bow. "Have a good day, Kurenai-sensei, Naruto-kun." "Bye Hinata." "Bye Hinata-chan." As she left, Naruto turned to Kurenai and gave a foxy grin. "Shall we get to the scroll?" he asked, and she returned the grin with their bodies still touching and responded, "Yes, let's do that, Naruto-kun." Hours later. "Okay, don't get too mad. But you're not doing it right." "Yes, I know that, Naruto-kun." Naruto got up from his chair and walked behind Kurenai. He put his hands on her shoulder and started giving her a message. "You need to calm down, Kurenai-chan, you're only getting stressed out and it's getting hard for you to act properly." Kurenai, who was slightly surprised by his actions, leaned into his touch. She let out a small moan as he hit a rather sensitive spot on her neck and she could almost feel his smirk from behind her. She felt hot breath on her ear. "Why don't we take a break from practicing?" She shuddered at the husky-sounding tone of his voice. She let out another moan as she felt his lips on her neck. She was feeling so much pleasure from a simple action, even she was surprised. She turned her head and she smashed her lips to his and he gladly returned it. She broke the kiss and stood up from her chair and grabbed his wrist and led him on the table as she jumped on top of him. She noticed his shocked eyes as hers were clouded with lust and happiness. "You don't know how long I've been waiting for this." She bent down and kisses him passionate past the lust and he returned it seconds later. He broke the kiss as he assaulted neck again, making her give off small moans in return. He could feel his hardness trying to break through as they grinded their bodies together. She grabbed his hands with hers and put them over her largely sized breasts, making him massage her more. "You can do anything, Naruto-kun," she said lustfully as he massaged her, and she grabbed his hardening meme through his clothes. He gave a grunt as she did so, and he unbuttoned her top shirt, making her crimson-colored bra come free. Knock knock knock. They snapped their heads to the door as the knocking returned a second later. Kurenai frowned as she gave Naruto an apologetic smile, and he nodded and she got off him and he went to the side out of sight from the door. She opened the door and, "Asuma. If this tender and mature Naruto touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Fox Fan Fiction. Your support helps us tell more stories of unexpected love and emotional growth. Thank you for watching." Folded hands, red heart.